So before we begin today's topic, just a smaller aura on yesterday's sugya, the sugya of working according to the hours that you're being paid. So a yid calls me up and he says to me, I want to tell you a story about the share that you gave yesterday. What's the story? The story goes like this. There was I think actually he's a bacha. He's working in somewhere in America, he's getting paid by the hour, and he goes over to the boss and he says, I want to be paid an extra $1 an hour. And the boss is like, I should pay an extra $1 an hour. So he takes out of his pocket his phone. He shows it's a flip phone. He says, I guarantee you I'm going to be working the full hour as opposed to all the other workers that have other phones and may not be doing that. The boss gave him an extra $1 an hour. So that's a Gavaldik Gazak based on yesterday's share. Today, Be'ezah Hashem. Today, I want to discuss a Gavaldik Inyan, which is very important, also very Nageya, also very, very Gishmak as well. The Gemara, in Avodah Zarah Daf Chav Tesamad base, the Gemara tells us like this. The Gemara says that in the olden days, in the ancient times, the way that was very common to be Oved Avodah Zarah was actually to pour wine. It was a way of serving idols. And therefore, says the Gemara in Avodah Zarah Chav Tes, the way that they actually used to serve idols was by pouring the wine in a specific manner, in a specific way, which is of course called Yayin Nesach, wine libations, right? Min HaTorah, the Gemara darshans from a pasuk, Ayin Sham, the Gemara Chav Tesam and base, that darshans from a pasuk, we're dealing with the Da'araisa, that a person is not allowed to have any hana whatsoever. Forget about drinking it. He can't have any benefit from it. He can't sell it. He can't even give it to a goy as a present. Okay? Now this is very Nageya. Why is this Nageya? It's Nageya because we have wine situations with goyim interaction in many, different scenarios. For example, you have the case that we dealt with a couple of days ago, which was the shaila of Marisayin, of going into a goyisha non-kosher restaurant. So we spoke about the shaila of Marisayin and we gave a couple of etera maybe. So it could be that a person has to go to a goyisha restaurant with some of his, goyisha partners or workers, whatever it may be. Now they serve wine. What's the din with that wine? Or for example, what happens if a person's making up satikin? He's making a l'chaim in the office, and he's bringing in a bissel van for the oilam with a bissel mazonis, right? Because versteht sich, you have to have mazonis, you have to have a boy preg often. Memela, the guy over there are coming along, also they're taking a bissel wine over there. What's the din in that case? Would that be mutter? Would that be osa for a person to do that? About giving presents also around the holiday season, around the end of December time. Also a very Nageya time that people are giving wine out and chocolates and other presents. Is that allowed to be done? Lots of different shilas that come in to the sugya of wine. So again, the Makar, Gemara of Avodah Zarah, Yain Nesach, it was done in a way specifically to be poured in a way for Avodah Zarah in that case. Chazal came along and they said that in order to limit the social interaction between Yidden and Goyim, specifically to prevent intermarriage, they said any wine that was poured by a Goy is considered to be Asa. That's a Durabonon, and that's what we call Stam Yenom. Not Yain Nesach, it stems from there, but it's called Stam Yenom. Now that is important, because it means that any wine without a Hechsha, that was not produced by Yidden with a kosher certification, will be considered to be Stam Yenom, not Yain Nesach, but Stam Yenom. Now, most of the shilas that we deal with today and in our lives are not going to be Yain Nesach generally, unless you have a chashash that the reason that they mixed it, poured it, touched it, whatever, was for Avodah Zarah purposes. Most of the reasons that we're going to be dealing with is Stam Yenom, which means we're going to be dealing with a Durabonon, which would mean, as we're going to explain in a minute, you're allowed to have Hana, but drinking it would be Asa. Because again, we're not generally dealing with so much. People are busy with wine in Avodah Zarah ways. Memela, that's the reason why we could generally be mekel in legabe the hana, but legabe drinking it avadana. And that's what's nagaya to most of the shilas that we have with wine when it comes in contact with goyim, is what we call stam yenom. Make sure you have the terms correct. Not yain nesach. It stems from there. It's called stam yenom, which is a derabonon. And the question is why? What is the reason that if it's not v'avodah zarah, again, the whole makar is a pasuk. The Gemara darshans Chav Tesam Avodah Zarah that people used to do Avodah Zarah. So nowadays you're telling me they don't do Avodah Zarah with wine, or at least the goyim that we know interact with are not doing Avodah Zarah with wine. So what's the problem? They're touching the wine. They move the wine. Right, by the way, this is my advice in B'chol Yom. I get shilas like this all the time, is that people call up, my goyish cleaner was in the home, and there was a bottle of wine sitting on the dining room table, on the kitchen table, in the fridge, whatever it may be, and the cleaner cleaned the fridge, the table, the counter, whatever, moved the wine. Am I allowed to drink the wine? These are ma'asim B'chol Yom, happens all the time. So again, I don't want to get too much involved in house shilas, this is doing business things, but again, it's a similar idea. What's the reason that we're asring it if there's no chashash avodah zarah? So there are two mahalchim why midirabanan Chazal came along and paskin that it's a problem. One is the Gemara in Avodah Zarah Chav Testament base that says we are still choishish that maybe the wine was used in some kind of, idol worshipping service. That could be one pshat. And the Gemara brings another pshat. And this is the Gemara in Avodah Zarah Lamed Vav base, where the Gemara says Chazal said it's also because they wanted to limit the social contact between Yidden and Goyim, specifically to prevent intermarriage. And since wine brings people closer, it's a social thing, therefore they said, don't drink wine and don't get involved with wine that Goyim touched, mixed, poured, whatever it may be. Now there are many Chazal, Gzeres Chazal, that they made for the same reason, right? For example, Pas Akum, Similar Shaila, Gvinas Akum, Bishol Akum. We find many Gzeres that Chazal made in a similar idea to prevent the connection, social interaction between Yidden and Goyim. Now, comes along Tosfos, and Tosfos says, what's the Ikka reason? There are two reasons we see in the Chazal. Zuk Tosfos, what's the Ikka reason? Tosfos and many of the Rishonim also. Tosfos says that the Ikka reason over here of Stan Yenom is to limit social contact. As I state in Tosfos, that's the Ikka reason. Mimela, what's the nafkamina? Which one is the Ikka one? And again, many of the Rishonim done this shaila. Tosfos says the nafkamina will be for us very nageya, and that will be since the Ikka reason is because of a social problem. Well, that will mean in that case that if a goy comes into contact with any of our wine, as long as we're not choishish, in other words, we do not suspect that there was an avodah zarah situation of service being done over here, then the wine will be forbidden to consume, it will be asked to drink, but hana will be mutter. Masha'enkin, if the other reason was the ikka, which is the reason of the avodah zarah reason, then it will be asked to have hana. Since, says Tosfos, the ikka reason is because of social interaction, so the drinking of the wine that a goy touched or poured or whatever, that will be asa midrabanan as a gzeira. But if having hana from it, giving it to a goy as a present or whatever, that might be mutter in that case. Now let's move on. Which type of wine are we dealing with? So the Gemara in Avodah Zarah Chav Testament base tells us in the Shulchan Aruch Paskins in Yeridei Siman Shin Chav Gimel Sif Gimel La Halacha La Ma'aseh like this. Says the Psak in Shulchan Aruch, again the Makor is the Gemara, that only wine or grape juice, but only wine that was never cooked is included in the Gzeira, is included in this prohibition of Stam Yenam. Cooked wine that was touched or even poured or shaken by a goy is 100% mutter even to drink. As I use the psak of Shulchan Aruch, that if it's cooked wine, then you are allowed not only to have hana from it if the goy mixed it, touched it, poured it, whatever, but you're even allowed to drink it without any problem whatsoever. So here's the kasha that everybody asks. Okay, that's if it's cooked. Nowadays we have something called pasteurization, where it's passed through very warm pipes. They don't actually bubble up the wine. That would be terrible for many of the good wines, but rather they pass it through warm pipes. Pasteurization. What's the din with pasteurization? Is that considered to be halachically cooked? Nafkamina, if a goy touches it, I'm allowed to drink it? Or no, it's not really considered to be cooked. They do it for the germs and other reasons as well. So maybe that's the reason why I would not have to be makel in that case. What din does pasteurization have? Lagabe de shaila. So Reb Moshe has a famous tshuva in the Gus Moshe Yeridei Chelik Gimel Siman Lamed, where Reb Moshe paskins that pasteurization is included in bishul. It's called cooked. If you have wine or grape juice that was pasteurized, and it says often on the bottle what it was done with it, that would be considered halachically cooked. Gabi stam yenom. Mimela, if a goy touched, poured, or mixed it, that would be not included in the gzeira, and there's no problem, no chashash whatsoever in that case. Moving on, Rabbi Isai. Moving on for this, by the way. Just agav, the reason why, what's the nafkamina? Because it's cooked, it's okay. So the Gemara tells us, the Gemara says in Avodah Zarah, Chav Tesam base, the reason why is because we're not choishish that anybody uses cooked wine for Avodah Zarah. It wasn't kind of Rosh also over there, and the Gemara Chav Tesam in Avodah Zarah also says that it's very uncommon for people to use cooked wine for Avodah Zarah purposes. Mimela, that's the reason why they never made the Gzeira D'Rabbanan on Stam Yenam if it was cooked already, because no one ever does Avodah Zarah with it. That's number one. Number two, what if it is a sealed bottle of wine? What happens if you have in the office, you have in your home a sealed bottle of uncooked, loy mavushal, wine? What is the din in that case? So once again, we go to the Gemara in Avodah Zarah here at Staf Samach Hamad Aleph, where the Gemara tells us quite clearly an interesting maisa. The Gemara says that you had a goy that was carrying a leather pouch, and in that leather pouch was wine, and it was tightly shut. And there was a yid walking behind the goy, watching to make sure that the bottle was never opened. Zuk de Gemara, the wine is 100% mutter in that case. Why? Says the Gemara of Avodah Zarah Daf Samach Amud Aleph, that libations, yayin nesach, was never done with a closed bottle. Mimela, if you have a closed bottle of eino mavushal, not cooked wine, it's not included in the gzeira, and therefore there will be no problem whatsoever. So it comes out in the Maisa. We're dealing with, it's to make a sikkim over here, we've got dealing with the gzeira d'rabbanan. Most of the shilas that we're dealing with the goyim in the workplace is a stam yenim shaila, not a yayin nesach shaila, because we're not dealing with a chashash of actual avodah zarah, which means hana would be mutter, drinking would be asa. However, two heterim we've said is number one, if it is cooked, even pasteurized, that's not included in the gzeira, and number two, if it's a closed bottle, that's another reason as well. One last heter over here today, and that would be, is what the Ramah says in Yeridei Semen Kuf Chav Gimel, and that is nafkamina of how it was touched. Whether it was touched b'kavona or she'ena b'kavona, meaning intentionally or not intentionally, right? And there, this is a very negay shayla, just up in the home, right? The goy cleaner opens up the fridge door, and in the door of the fridge you've got a bottle of wine. These are meisim all the time. Left over from Shabbos, it's eina b'vushel and it's open. So now you've got no heter from the heterim that we just spoke about a minute ago. What do you do now? So here the Ramah comes along and says it depends how it was touched. If it was unintentionally touched, for example, the guy opened up the fridge door and in the door was a bottle of wine that's open and not muvushal, the halacha is that's mutter, that's not a problem. Even so, if you saw the guy pick up the bottle of wine to clean the counter and put it straight back down, that's also not a problem whatsoever. It's only if it was specifically touched, poured or mixed by a goy, then it would be a problem. So again, Rabbi say, stam yenim we're dealing with is gzeira v'drabanan. We have three heterim. Heter number one, if it's cooked. Heter number two, if it's closed. And heter number three, if it wasn't touched in an intentional way. Be careful when you're interacting with goyim. Chazal made specific gzeiras to make sure that we don't get too close. And of course, make sure if you do have wine that it fits one of those heterim. Otherwise, it will be asa for a person to drink. Have an amazing day.